My mother-in-law came to visit her grandkids, unaware her son had abandoned us. One look at an empty frame, and she blamed me. She never expected the truth. Milo was 8 months old and teething like he had a personal vendetta against gums. Ruby was 4 and currently in her why phase, which sounds adorable until you've answered why 47 times before. Breakfast and start questioning the structural integrity of reality itself. Why is the sky blue? Why do dogs bark? Why can't babies eat batteries? Fantastic question, Ruby. Let's circle back to that one before CPS gets ideas. So when the doorbell rang that afternoon, I already felt like someone had put my nervous system through a paper shredder. And then Diane arrived. Perfect hair, perfect coat, perfect pearls. Looking like she'd just stepped out of a magazine for wealthy women who describe emotional neglect as a challenging season. I should have known immediately this was going to be a disaster. Not because of her outfit, because of her expression. See, people think judgment starts when someone opens their mouth. Wrong. Judgment starts in the eyes. The mouth just files the paperwork afterward. The second she stepped inside, her gaze started moving. Mail pile, laundry basket, baby toys, staircase, coffee cups, me. And then the empty frame. God. That stupid empty frame. The wedding photo had been there for 7 years. 7. Long enough that the bookshelf looked weird without it. Like when somebody loses a tooth and your brain keeps staring at the gap. Diane stopped. Not physically. Emotionally. You know those nature documentaries where a predator locks onto movement? That. Her eyes hit that frame and suddenly she wasn't visiting. She was investigating. And somehow, magically, she had already decided who committed the crime. Spoiler alert. It wasn't her precious son. Shocking. Absolutely groundbreaking. Someone alert the scientific community. Why is that frame empty? Just like that. No hello? No hug. No, how are the kids? Straight to the evidence. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes your brain gets so overwhelmed it starts throwing random emergency exits at you. Like, sure, Nora, laugh. That's definitely the appropriate response to the collapse of your marriage. Maybe do a cartwheel next. I adjusted Milo on my shoulder. He immediately tried eating my shirt. Fantastic. Another tiny man in my life consuming resources while contributing nothing. Love that for me. I looked at Diane. Really looked at her. And for the first time, I saw something I'd missed during all the years. Eric and I were married. She didn't come here to understand. She came here to confirm. Huge difference. People who want understanding ask questions. People who want confirmation arrive carrying answers. She already had hers. I was just expected to cooperate. Unfortunately for everybody involved, I was fresh out of cooperation. Actually, that's not true. I had cooperation. For my kid, for my lawyer, for my pediatrician, for literally anyone operating in objective reality. But for this? No, absolutely not. Because here's the thing. Eric had left 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks earlier. And somehow I was already being treated like the suspect in a crime where he literally left fingerprints, surveillance footage, a signed confession, and probably a commemorative mug, world's most obvious affair. Congratulations, Eric. Collect your prize. He'd walked out on a newborn, an actual newborn, a baby so small he still looked vaguely confused about being born, and somehow the conversation was already orbiting around what I had done wrong. Incredible. Honestly, men should study whatever public relations firm handles this phenomenon. The speed is unbelievable. A guy could set a house on fire and somebody's aunt would immediately ask whether his wife had been supportive enough. Maybe she made him feel unseen while he was committing arson. Have we considered that? Maybe the gasoline felt emotionally safer. I know that's bitter. I don't care. At that point, bitterness was the only thing keeping my spine upright. Diane finally looked away from the frame. Then she looked directly at me, and there it was. The assessment. God, I hated that look. Mothers like Diane have a way of evaluating women that feels less like observation and more like livestock judging. Hair, clothes, weight, energy, house, children, mental state. Everything gets scored. Everything. And I was losing badly. My hair hadn't seen a brush in hours, maybe days. Time had become theoretical. There was formula on my sleeve, crackers in my pocket. I smelled faintly like baby shampoo and exhaustion. Meanwhile, Diane looked like she'd been assembled by a luxury department store. And I could practically hear her conclusions forming. Not disciplined, not organized, not maintaining standards. Not enough, not enough, not enough. Funny thing though, people like Diane always mistake appearance for competence. They see a polished woman and assume she's holding everything together. They see a tired woman and assume she's falling apart. Meanwhile, I had spent the last 3 weeks keeping 2 children alive while simultaneously building a legal case, detailed enough to make a forensic accountant blush. But sure, judge me by the laundry basket. That seems fair. The really wild part? I wasn't even angry yet. Not fully. I was still in survival mode. The anger came later. This was something colder, something sharper. Recognition. Because standing there, watching Diane stare at that empty frame, I realized something important. Eric hadn't abandoned me alone. He'd been preparing witnesses. And judging by the look on his mother's face, he'd been working on her for a long time. And that realization, that was the moment the real war started. Not the divorce, not custody, not court. The narrative. Because once somebody decides you're the villain, they stop collecting facts. They start collecting confirmation. And Diane Caldwell had just walked into my house carrying a script. The problem was, I already had the receipts. And unlike her son, I documented everything. The funny thing about people who think they're in control is how fast they panic when they discover somebody else brought paperwork. Not emotions, not accusations, not dramatic speeches. Paperwork. Nothing terrifies a manipulative person quite like documentation, because feelings can be argued with. Facts are annoying. Facts keep showing up. Facts don't get tired. Facts don't forget dates. Facts don't suddenly remember things differently 6 months later over brunch. Facts are basically the cockroaches of accountability. And I had a whole infestation. The day after Diane's visit, I didn't spend my morning crying. thinking, I know, terrible female protagonist behavior. Somewhere a Hallmark executive just collapsed. Instead, I spent the morning assembling furniture, because life is a joke. An actual joke. My marriage had detonated. My mother-in-law had essentially accused me of causing it, and there I was at 9 in the morning trying to decipher Swedish instructions for a bookshelf. Why do furniture instructions always look like ancient cave drawings? Little stick man, little screwdriver, arrow, 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 suddenly bookshelf. No explanation, no context. No mercy. I swear furniture companies think we're all descendants of master carpenters. Meanwhile, I'm staring at diagram B, wondering if the wooden peg goes into slot D, or if I've accidentally created a structural hazard, which honestly describes most of my adult life. Anyway, I was halfway through attaching shelf number 3 when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but divorce turns every unknown number into a potential problem. Could be a lawyer, could be court, could be a bill, could be somebody trying to sell me solar panels. Honestly, all 4 categories feel equally threatening, I answered. The woman introduced herself as someone from Ruby's preschool administration. Immediately, my stomach dropped, because parenthood rewires your brain. A school calling is never neutral. Nobody calls to say your child had an acceptable Tuesday. It's always something, your kid bit another kid, your kid got hurt, your kid licked a radiator. There's always a story, but this wasn't that. This was stranger, much stranger. Apparently, someone had called the school asking detailed questions about pickup authorization procedures. Not me, not Eric, someone else. The administrator wasn't giving information, which thank God, because if she had, I'd have launched myself directly into the sun. But she wanted to notify me because the questions had been unusually specific. Specific. That's the word she used. And suddenly, every alarm bell in my body started screaming. Not because I thought anyone was kidnapping my child. Let's be clear. This wasn't that. It was something different, something sneakier. The kind of thing people do when they're trying to establish access before asking for it directly. The kind of thing people do when they think rules are optional if they have the right last name. I thanked her, hung up, sat there, and just stared at the half-built bookshelf. Because of course. Could I have one crisis at a time? Just one? I'm not greedy. I don't need life to be easy. I just want my disasters scheduled properly. Maybe color-coded, maybe alphabetized, maybe assigned numbers like hurricanes. This is Crisis Kevin. Kevin arrives Tuesday. Please prepare accordingly. Instead, everything was arriving simultaneously, like my life had accidentally opened 20 browser tabs. I called Patricia. She listened, asked 3 questions, then got very quiet. Not bad quiet, lawyer quiet. There's a difference. Bad quiet feels like doom. Lawyer quiet feels like somebody loading ammunition. Document it, she said. Already did. Good. That's it. That was the conversation. God, I love that woman. Not romantically, emotionally, spiritually, professionally. The way exhausted people love competence. You know that feeling when you're drowning and suddenly somebody shows up holding a boat? That. The next week moved fast. Too fast. The court appointed a guardian ad litem, Kevin Park. The first thing that struck me about Kevin was how aggressively normal he seemed. I expected some intimidating legal shark. Instead, he looked like a guy who might help you choose mulch at a garden center, which honestly made him more terrifying. The dangerous professionals never look dangerous. The dangerous professionals look calm. They look hydrated. They own practical shoes. Kevin arrived at my house on a Thursday afternoon. Ruby immediately showed him every stuffed animal she possessed. Every single one. I learned more about stuffed animal politics during that hour than I ever wanted to know. Apparently, Mr. Pickles outranks Princess Bunny. Princess Bunny resents this. There are tensions. Diplomatic relations remain unstable. Kevin listened seriously, took notes, asked questions, and meanwhile I was having an out-of-body experience watching my daughter conduct a congressional hearing on stuffed animals. Kids are unbelievable. Adults spend thousands on therapy trying to communicate honestly. Children walk into a room and immediately explain their entire emotional ecosystem using a stuffed giraffe. No masks, no strategy, no image management, just chaos and truth. Kevin observed everything, not in a creepy way, in a careful way, the way somebody studies patterns, routine, environment, behavior, reality, and that's when I started understanding something important. This process wasn't rewarding whoever talked best. It rewarded whoever actually showed up, day after day, appointment after appointment, meal after meal, night after night, not the performance, the pattern. And patterns were where Eric had a problem, because patterns leave trails. Anybody can be a good parent for an afternoon, a weekend, a photo, a social media post. Hell, some people build entire identities out of 15-minute interactions. But consistency. Consistency is expensive. Consistency requires sacrifice. Consistency requires being there when nobody's watching. And that's where reality starts collecting receipts. A few days later, Kevin interviewed Eric separately. I wasn't there. Didn't want to be there. Frankly, at that point, I'd rather scrub grout with a toothbrush. But afterward, something changed. I could feel it. No concrete proof. Just atmosphere. Pressure. The weather shifting. You know how animals supposedly sense storms before humans? That was me. Emotionally feral. Picking up barometric pressure changes in family court. Because suddenly Eric's side stopped acting confident. The motions became more aggressive. The requests became weirder. The urgency increased. And panic has a smell. Not literally. Metaphorically. Though honestly, if panic had a smell, it'd probably be expensive. Cologne and bad decisions. The point is this. For the first time since he'd left, Eric seemed worried. Not sad. Not guilty. Worried. Huge difference. Sad people reflect. Guilty people apologize. Worried people calculate. And I knew that look. I'd been married to it for 7 years. The problem for him was simple. The version of me he'd planned for wasn't showing up. He expected devastation. Expected collapse. Expected emotional wreckage. Expected me to spend months chasing explanations. Instead, I kept moving. Pediatric appointments. school pickups, legal filings, consulting work, grocery lists, bedtime stories. Normal life, messy life, real life. The machine kept running. Not because I was fearless. God, no. I was terrified half the time. The difference was that fear wasn't driving. Fear was just screaming from the back seat, very loudly, like an unhinged GPS. You are ruined. In 300 feet, continue straight. Everything is falling apart. Turn left at the stop sign, but I kept driving. And somewhere during those weeks, something unexpected happened. I stopped seeing myself as the abandoned wife. I started seeing myself as the person still standing. Tiny difference. Massive difference. Because one identity revolves around what somebody did to you. The other revolves around what you do next. And while Eric was busy realizing his old narrative wasn't working anymore, I was quietly becoming someone he no longer knew how to predict, which turned out to be a much bigger problem for him than the divorce itself. 3 months after Eric left, I made the mistake of thinking things were stabilizing. I know, embarrassing. Truly rookie behavior. You'd think by 34 years old, I would have learned that the universe treats confidence like a personal challenge. The second you think, okay, maybe I can breathe now. Life kicks open a door carrying a folding chair. But for a little while, things actually felt manageable. Not good. Let's not get delusional. Just manageable. There's a difference. Good as a beach vacation. Manageable is surviving Tuesday. I was surviving Tuesday, and Wednesday, even Thursday. Ruby had settled into her routine. Milo had finally started sleeping in longer stretches. Not long enough to qualify as rest. More like temporary unconsciousness. But I'll take what I can get. My consulting work was picking up. Bills were getting paid. The house wasn't spotless, but nobody was actively eating crayons. Progress. Massive progress. Then February happened. Specifically one Friday afternoon. The school fundraiser. God. School fundraisers. Who designed these things? Why are parents expected to buy wrapping paper, cookie dough, raffle tickets, silent auction baskets, and somehow also maintain mental health? Every fundraiser feels like society collectively deciding to mug exhausted adults. Anyway, Ruby's preschool hosted a family dinner. Nothing fancy. Cheap pasta. Plastic tablecloths. Tiny juice boxes. 30 children moving at the speed of chaos. Normal stuff. The kind of event where somebody always spills something red on something white. The laws of physics demand it. I almost didn't go. Honestly, the idea of voluntarily entering a room with 80 overstimulated humans sounded medically dangerous. But Ruby was excited. And when your kid spends 2 days talking about something, you go, that's the contract. Nobody tells you this before parenthood. Children basically become tiny event coordinators. Congratulations, you're attending everything now. So we went. I got Milo situated, found our table, grabbed food, started mentally preparing for 2 hours of social interaction, and then I saw her, Kelsey, right there, 20 feet away, holding a plate of baked ziti. I nearly inhaled my own tongue. Now here's the thing. I had never actually met Kelsey. Not officially. I'd seen photographs, court documents, social media screenshots, the occasional accidental glimpse, but never in person. And suddenly there she was, existing. Breathing, getting Parmesan cheese. Honestly rude. I know that sounds irrational. It is irrational, but nobody talks about this part. Nobody talks about how strange it feels seeing the person who helped dismantle your life standing next to a buffet table, discussing salad dressing. My brain could not process it. I wanted her to look evil. That's the truth. I wanted cartoon villain energy, black smoke, lightning, a soundtrack, something. Instead, she looked normal, which somehow made me angrier. Normal people should not be allowed to create this much destruction. At least supervillains commit to the aesthetic. Kelsey looked like someone who leaves positive Yelp reviews. The audacity. I immediately turned around. Nope, absolutely not. Not today. I was here for Ruby. I was here for baked pasta. I was not participating in whatever bizarre emotional crossover episode this was. Then Ruby spotted another kid and sprinted away. Because of course she did. Children move with the confidence of people who have never paid taxes. 1 second she's beside you. The next, she's halfway across the building. I followed. Milo balanced on my hip. Mom reflexes activated. And somehow, through a sequence of events I still don't fully understand, I ended up near Kelsey, close enough to hear, not eavesdropping. Important distinction. Eavesdropping requires effort. This woman was basically broadcasting. And that's when I heard something that made my entire body freeze. She was talking about Eric, specifically his finances, specifically complaining about them. I blinked. Wait, what? She sounded annoyed, actually beyond annoyed, frustrated. The kind of frustration people only show when expectations aren't matching reality. And suddenly pieces started shifting in my head. Fast. Because here's something nobody tells you about affairs. The fantasy ends when the bills arrive. You can build a relationship entirely on excitement, secrecy, adrenaline, escapism. But eventually somebody has to unload groceries. Eventually somebody has to schedule dentist appointments. Eventually somebody has to figure out why the electric bill tripled. Real life always catches up. Always. And from the sound of things, reality had arrived carrying a baseball bat. I moved away before she noticed me, not because I was scared, because I wasn't interested. That's different. Huge difference. A few months earlier, I would have obsessed over every word, every detail, every clue. Now, I was tired, profoundly tired, not sleepy, life tired, the kind of tired that creates clarity. I suddenly realized I didn't actually care whether their relationship was thriving, or struggling, or exploding. Not my circus, not my lawsuit, not my emotional support disaster. For months, I'd been carrying this invisible weight, this belief that somewhere out there existed a better version of my life. The version Eric had chosen, the upgraded model, the replacement, the thing supposedly worth detonating a family for, standing there with a paper plate in my hand. I finally understood something. There was no upgraded model. There was just another life, another complicated human, another collection of problems, different mess. same species. And weirdly, that realization felt incredible because comparison had been poisoning me without me even noticing. Every time I struggled, every time I felt lonely, every time something broke, part of my brain wondered whether they were happier, whether leaving had worked, whether I had lost some invisible competition. But standing there, watching reality leak through the cracks, I finally understood there was no competition. There never had been. The marriage wasn't a game. The divorce wasn't a scoreboard. Nobody won. A family broke. People adapted. Life continued. That's it. Not glamorous, not cinematic, just true. Then came the best part, the genuinely hilarious part, the thing that nearly made me choke on a breadstick. Later that evening, during the raffle drawing, Eric arrived, late, flustered, sweating, looking like a man who had recently lost an argument, and Kelsey immediately spotted him, and whatever expression crossed her face. Oh, wow. Listen, I'm not proud of how much satisfaction I felt. I should probably evolve spiritually. Maybe meditate. Maybe journal. Maybe become one of those enlightened people who release negativity into the universe. Unfortunately, I am currently made of bones and pettiness. The look on her face said everything. Not romance. Not excitement. Not butterflies. Administrative frustration. The expression of someone dealing with customer service. And suddenly I saw it. The whole thing. The illusion collapsing. Not dramatically. Not explosively. Just slowly. The way cheap wallpaper peels. The way paint cracks. The way reality always wins. And for the first time since my marriage ended, I laughed. Not externally. Internally. Deep in my soul. Because after months of grief, panic, lawyers, schedules, documents, hearings, exhaustion, survival, I finally realized something absolutely beautiful. Eric wasn't my problem anymore. He was somebody else's. 3 weeks after the fundraiser, I got a call at 6 on a Wednesday morning. Nobody calls at 6 a.m. with good news. At 6 a.m., you're either dead, arrested, or creating paperwork. I was making coffee when Eric's name popped up. I stared at it. The audacity. The man had spent months communicating through attorneys, parenting apps, and the emotional warmth of a parking ticket. Now suddenly he was calling? At sunrise? Absolutely suspicious, I answered. No greeting, no small talk, just silence, then a sigh. A huge one. The kind that sounds expensive. I immediately knew something had happened. And for the first time in months, I wasn't nervous. I was curious. Very different feeling. Turns out Kelsey had moved out. Apparently not recently. A few days earlier, I hadn't known. Because unlike before, I no longer tracked his life like it was breaking news. Frankly, I was busy keeping 2 children alive and remembering to buy toothpaste. He kept talking. I stopped listening halfway through, not intentionally. My brain just wandered because something weird happened while he explained. I realized I didn't care. Like, at all. Months ago, I would have analyzed every word, every pause, every detail. Now, nothing. My coffee was more interesting. Actually, scratch that. The weird stain on my kitchen ceiling was more interesting. He finally stopped talking, waiting for something. Sympathy, maybe. Validation. A reaction. Who knows? I looked out the window. Ruby's backpack was sitting by the door. Milo's favorite stuffed dinosaur was upside down on the couch. Normal morning. Normal life. And suddenly Eric felt very far away, like a character from a previous season of a show I'd stopped watching. Nora, I blinked. Right? Still on the phone. Yeah? Another pause. Then he asked the question. The one that would have destroyed me a year earlier. Do you ever think we could have fixed it? I actually laughed. Not a mean laugh. Not a cruel laugh. Just surprised. Because what a bizarre thing to ask. After everything. After lawyers. After custody schedules. After moving in with another woman. Now we're doing reflection? Sir. The theater is closed. The actors went home. The set has been dismantled. I looked at the clock. 6:19. 7 whole minutes of my life already gone. No, I said. Simple. Clean. True. Silence. Then another sigh. Honestly, he sighed so much during that call, I thought his lungs were filing a resignation letter. Eventually, he said goodbye. I said goodbye. The call ended. That was it. No dramatic speech. No revenge. No final showdown. Just a phone call ending, which weirdly enough felt perfect. 3 hours later, I was at Ruby's school for a parent art showcase. Construction paper chaos everywhere. Glitter on every available surface. A war crime committed against vacuum cleaners. Ruby dragged me toward her project. Excited. Breathless. Proud. It was a family portrait. Stick figures. Crooked smiles. A giant yellow sun. Classic kid art. I looked closer. There was Ruby. There was Milo. There was me. Just us. No empty space. No missing person. No extra figure she'd forgotten to draw. Just the people she thought belonged there. Mama, she said, bouncing on her toes. Do you like it? I stared at the picture, then at her, then back at the picture. And honestly, it was perfect. One of the eyes was floating near my forehead. My arm looked like a noodle. Milo resembled a potato with shoes. But still, perfect. I love it. She grinned. Then immediately ran off because children have the attention span of caffeinated squirrels. I stood there holding the paper, smiling like an idiot. For a second, I remembered the empty frame on the bookshelf. The one Diane noticed the second she walked into my house. The one that felt so important back then. Funny, I hadn't thought about that frame in months. When I got home that afternoon, I finally knew what belonged there. I took down the empty frame, slid Ruby's drawing inside, hung it on the shelf. Done. And honestly, it looked a hell of a lot better there anyway. And that's where we'll leave today's story. Grab a blanket, take a breath, and remember to be kind to yourself. Thanks for spending a little time here with me. Until next time, stay cozy and take care.